Hi everyone, I'm Angelina Fabro, and I'm here to share some very simple usability guidelines with you for application development. Let's begin by examining one of the most fundamental pieces of applications on the web, hyperlinks. On a desktop, it's much easier to be precise about where you want to click because your mouse cursor is small. You know what's not small? Our fingers, relative to the pointer or the cursor, of course. So this means that when you're considering your application for touchscreen devices, you need to adapt accordingly. Links should be obviously clickable, so what makes it obvious to a user that something can be clicked on? Now, modern app development style has become very flat and minimalistic, which, I'm not going to lie, I like a lot. But one of the reasons that buttons with a pop-out gradient effect and glossiness were so popular for so long was because they were always really easy to tell that, hey, you can click on this thing. If you're targeting mobile devices, you should probably avoid traditional hyperlinks in favor of buttons. That doesn't mean that you can't use anchor tags, but style them to be button-like and pay attention to how big those buttons are. Your buttons should be at the very minimum the size of a chubby finger, which is really about 44 pixels tall and minimum 40 pixels wide at the very least. Sometimes you can make them a little bit smaller, but not by much. It really depends on what other elements are nearby. You don't want users frustrated that when they mean to tap on one button, they hit another by mistake because they're close and the tap area for each is too small. If you have a web style link, which is to say a more traditional anchor tag like you'd see on a desktop site, it's important that the link stands out. The color of your link should be different from the color of your text. If possible, blue. That really ugly blue color that just screams, this is a clickable link, you should click this thing, or something that draws that kind of attention to it. This brings me to my second point. The reason that blue links are easier to use than say red links or green links is because we expect links to be blue. It is a convention that's been around since the dawn of the web. It's a pattern that users are familiar with. Be conventional. I know that when you design things, there's a really strong desire to be unique, a desire to be clever. It's hard to say don't be unique and clever with a straight face, but I can at least say don't be too unique if you don't have to. Because when things look and act familiar, your users can become conversant with your software much more quickly. When you're using a mobile application and you pull the content down to refresh, that's another convention, or design pattern, as it's sometimes put. For another example, let's take a look at the major search engines on the web and see if we can find some similarities. Take a look at Bing and then compare it to Google and Yahoo and look at how closely they all seem similar. Google was the first to pioneer this interface, and the convention has spread. There are other conventions that users find really useful, like the back button. Don't break the back button. This is a wide generalization, but so be it. So most users don't read everything on a page before they decide what they want to click on. And users who are looking for something particularly quickly will scan the page and click the first thing that looks even vaguely like what they want. Part of the reason that this sort of behavior works for users is that the cost of visiting the wrong page is very low. The back button supports a quick exit from anywhere you might visit that's not where you want to be. And the back button isn't unique to the browser. It's reached the point where this ubiquitous button has appeared everywhere again and again. iOS applications, Android applications, all of those usually have a back button built right in. Yet with all of this support for the back button, some tools break this functionality. Lots of banking applications and older Java applications have serious trouble handling the back button. Single-page JavaScript applications have to be extra careful about this. A user could intend to leave a view in your application that you've taken them to, only to leave your application altogether. Modern client-side frameworks that are used to build single-page applications have implemented back button support. Look for a router class. Make sure you're paying attention to this crucial feature early, right from the beginning as you design the architecture of your application. Proofread and edit. You wouldn't think of this as a usability tip, but I promise you it absolutely is. If your application has text in it, and most applications do, go over that text with a fine-tooth comb. Make sure it's clear and make sure it's concise. Write what you want to say, and then as an exercise, walk away from it for an hour or two. And when you come back, try and make your second draft shorter than the first. As mentioned earlier, often users don't read everything on a given page, and this is especially true when there is too much content. It can be overwhelming. To get your message to your users, make your point as brief and concise as possible. It's as simple as going through your wording line by line, and for each line asking yourself, is this necessary? Could I make this clearer? And if you're a soul whose intentions are good, you have to read your text and ask, how could this be misunderstood? Why does this button read submit? Which actually brings us to our last point. Sometimes you should discard conventions that don't work. For some reason, one of the most common bits of text you'll find on a button is still the word submit. Submit as in submit this to the server, not submit to my will, foolish mortals. It's almost always a valid thing to put on a button, send this to the server is often what you're doing, but it's so general and the user doesn't really care about that. The thing is, a lot of the time, send this to the server is just a step in the process, and it's not something that the user needs to care about. It should be opaque to them. So stop for a second and think of the end result of clicking on the submit button. Will this create a user? What action does this take? Change the text on the button to read something like create user or create. Describe the action. Well, that's a wrap. Remember to like and subscribe, and thanks for watching.